now what we're going to discuss today is what happens after death. So the first thing to know is you don't become a different person just because you die. Who you are is who you are. So people sometimes have very superficial ideas about what the afterworld is like, probably from cartoons you watched when you were a child. So you remember seeing Roadrunner? Like, so Roadrunner is like after his enemy, and he has a hammer, and he goes boing, and then the enemy like dies and becomes an angel. No. Okay. No. You're still you. You're still you. So whatever you wanted 5 minutes before your death, that's what you want 5 minutes afterwards. So I'm going to give you a negative example and then a positive one. Are any of you from LA? Because, so you'll remember the person now who I'm describing, even though it's not a real person. Okay? So somebody lives in LA, and she's a total materialist. Could that happen?
Yes.
It could. So she gets up in the morning. What's the first thought in her head? What am I going to wear today? So she goes to her large step-in closet and chooses an outfit. And then she has her first big decision of the day. She's going to go into the shower. She has 5 different kinds of body wash. Which kind is she going to use? Because you have to choose between scent, okay, cream, all sorts of choices. So she makes her choices, okay? And she sort of, in a basic sense, gets dressed. But before she gets dressed, it's time to work out a little bit before breakfast, because if you get your system working before you eat, the calories are burned at an entirely different level because your metabolism started. So she's on, she's on the treadmill for like 20 minutes. Okay, then she eats. What's her breakfast got to be?
Look at TikTok.
Fruit. What?
TikTok.
Okay. Okay. So here she is. She's having fruit. Now that's called worshiping the media. Okay. Okay, so now, next activity of the day. So she gets fully dressed. That means makeup, hair. How long does that take? It could take at least an hour, at least. Okay, you're talking? Okay, yeah. So here it is, takes her an hour. So now she's ready for her first morning activity. So if it's Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday, she goes to her psychologist. Okay. And if it's a different day, one day it's yoga, and another day it's like ceramics. Okay. And then she has like her midday like drink of water, then tennis. And now, okay, now it's time to go home for lunch. What's lunch? Salad, okay. Now after lunch, okay, for sure. After her salad lunch, she has to rest, because if you don't rest during the day, your skin gets dry. So this is very, see? So she has her little rest. So there's time like for a second shower, and getting dressed again, and hair again, makeup again, like the whole thing. So she's ready to roll around 4 o'clock, and now it's time for her afternoon activity, which is shopping, okay? Yay for shopping, okay. And then after shopping, she's going to meet with her friends. For what? What will she meet for her friends to do at around 5, 6? Not yet. Coffee. Okay. Latte. Okay, maybe. Froyo, yeah, right, froyo. That's much better, froyo. Okay, so it's time to go home and get dressed again, because now it's time, like it's night. It's time for what? Dinner and dancing. Okay, clear?
Tequila shots.
Yeah. Okay, you there?
What is that?
Okay. Could there be somebody like this?
Yes.
Okay. So here it is, 4 in the afternoon. What's she doing? Let's go back. Shopping. So she sees it from across the street. It's in Bergdorf. It's a bag. What's a very hot kind of a bag?
Birkin.
Yeah, better. What?
Michael Kors.
Yeah, that's better than either of them. What color?
Oh, a nice tan, yeah. Like
Tan. What's it made out of?
leather.
Of course. And it's only $500. It's half price. It's on sale. So she wants to get a better look at it. She crosses the street, but she didn't look. It only took a minute. It was the bus. Okay. She was gone. Okay. Now, so what did she want a minute before she died?
A Michael Kors bag.
Okay. That's still who she is. But now that desire is not fulfillable because without a body, this has no relevance. Okay, clear? Okay, so where is she? Her body is not operative.
She's still on earth.
But she's still here. She still exists because the soul isn't the body. The soul doesn't stop because the body stops. So let's talk about what the soul is. So in order to talk about what it is, let's talk about what it isn't. The soul isn't the body. So I want to show how this works. Suppose, God forbid, you were in an accident and you lost your hand. Would you still be you or would you be me? You'd still be you. Now I could take you through all of the limbs and organs of your body, both hands, both legs. No matter what happens to your body, you have an individual and unique sense of self that's not like anybody else. Is that true?
Yes.
That's because your soul is not your body. People sometimes will say, well, it's not your soul, it's just your memories, because you've experienced different things. So that's not that either. I want you to do an experiment. Go back to the earliest memory you could recall. Go back as far back as you can. Okay, so remember these memories, you were still you, right? So that you were very much you, even though this is before you went to school, before you had your friends, before the terrible boyfriend, before, so you aren't just memories. You understand this? You have a sense of self that goes all the way back. And I want to tell you something. Really, your mind imprints things much earlier than 2 or 3. But the way your mind works, the way everybody's mind works, is the file under which your memories are there. You have to have words to bring it up. So before you were very fluent in words you can't recall. But you were still you, even when you were 1, even when you were a minute old. It's all filed away. You just can't access it. So your soul isn't your memory, and your soul isn't your body. The soul is the essential self. So that doesn't change, and the soul is going to be affected by the choices you make throughout. So this person who I just described, very one-dimensionally. There's nobody who's that materialistic. Everyone has some relationships that cares about something. I made her very plastic. Okay, so when her body doesn't work, that's a very sad situation because what she's experiencing is painful frustration. Okay, so now, if you were to take a person who lives a good life, so let's say what they wanted a minute before they died was for somebody who they care about to be happy. That wish is spiritual, so that still has meaning. So what happens next? So the person's on an immediate level, they still are observant and aware of what's happening here. So this is why there's been a lot of death literature written in the last 50 years. The most famous was by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I don't know if you heard of her. Where they would interview people who had what they call near-death experiences, meaning they're clinically dead and then they're resuscitated. So they all tell the same story, and the story they tell is the story that the Talmud tells. It's the same story. At first, they're fully aware of everything that's happening around them. So they could describe, let's say, members of the medical team who were treating them, what was said, how they looked, even though they couldn't see them with their eyes. Okay, clear? Their eyes are closed. Okay, the next stage is the person feels themselves being drawn towards a great and beautiful light. So people will use different words to describe the goodness of this light, and they always come down to this: it can't be put into words, but they're drawn towards it. So the people who are resuscitated, for whatever reason, move back, otherwise they wouldn't be resuscitated. But as they're headed towards this great goodness, they recall their entire lives. So I heard a radio interview once. There was an Ethiopian fellow, who was a policeman, And the Arabs threw an explosive on Strauss Street downtown, and he threw himself on the explosive to absorb the impact, and he survived, which is very unusual. He survived. So he had a long recovery. It was 2 years later when he was interviewed on the radio. So they asked him, like, what made you do this? So he told the truth. He said, I thought I would die anyway, so I may as well try to save other people. And he said, like, and what do you remember next? So he said, I remember, like, waking up in the hospital, but a lot happened before. So they said, what do you mean? He said, well, I could see myself. I was back in my village in Ethiopia. I could see my grandfather, and he was dead for many years. He began to talk about his life. And the moderator, who clearly had a political agenda, said, do you think the government is doing enough against terrorism? And he said, it's not about the government. Nothing is about the government. I saw, like, what life is really about. Don't you get what I'm telling you? I saw, like, the progression of all of the people in their lives and what had meaning and what didn't. And the guy didn't give up. He said, do you think that if labor was in the government, that things would be done differently? And he kept on going back to this. It really isn't about this. And until finally they just were like two ships meeting in the night and going their own separate courses. Okay, so what happens next? So what happens next is a person then experiences this great goodness, which is Hashem. So in this phase of being, every good deed you did in your life, the pleasure you had comes back. So in this world, you could do something enormously meaningful, but you forget it in a short time. So I want to illustrate this to you. One of my sons was a junior counselor in a camp here. And the camp went to one of the big parks in the north. So in this park, they have a wooden pedestrian bridge that goes over a stream. So I want you to realize there were maybe like 10 kids in the bunk, and there's a counselor and a junior counselor. How old are counselors in camps usually?
16, 17.
17 or so. So a 17-year-old boy in terms of maturity is like what? Like a 12-year-old girl, whatever. Like I should say that. But anyway, the counselor was also not miodea, so mature. So they're going over this wooden bridge, and the counselor says, I don't want to see any fooling around. You have to be careful, don't fall over, don't jump into the water, this isn't a joke. Now B9, what did you just hear the counselor say?
Jump in the water.
Jump in the water, that's fun, that's what I should do. Only the dorks aren't going to jump in the water. Okay, clear? So immediately 2 boys jumped in the water, okay? But there was a whirlpool. So they're being swept under and out. So the counselor saw this happening, and he thought they were fooling around, but he went in after them. He didn't know there was a whirlpool. So he also is being swept under and out. So my son saw this. He realized the counselor, who's like a big guy, if he can't get out, that means that something's wrong. So he had enough presence of mind to grab a branch and to reach out towards the counselor. He was able to save all 3 of them, okay, by like pulling them in with this branch that he broke off a tree. So you can imagine what happens next. So they call the emergency squad, and everybody's taken to the hospital to be examined. Everybody was basically okay. And then there's like, the head of the camp is involved, and there's a whole ceremony and an award, and these like tearful phone calls from mommy and daddy. Yeah, I'll never forget what you've done. That kind of thing. Okay, and he gets this like very beautiful certificate that's framed, okay? Now my son is in his 40s. He has a mortgage, he has a lot of kids, he lives in Muncie, New York. How often do you think he looks at this certificate or thinks about this whole story? Never. In fact, I own the certificate. He didn't even want it when he moved. So I don't really have where to hang it. I'm not going to like, whatever. So it's in my living room, but whatever. So the reason I'm telling you this is that we live in time. So the way time operates, what's time? Give me a reasonable definition of time.
Something you can't get back.
Progression, the change.
You're right. It's the progression of change. Okay? So anything that's in the now is not going to be there again in a split second. There's constant change. So we measure time through the rotations and revolutions, right? The rotations and revolutions of the earth. But that's not what time is. Time is the changes, the progression of change. So because of this, in this world, you can't hold on to spiritual pleasure because new things happen. So I'll give you another example. Suppose you found the right guy. Wow. Ve'ezrat Hashem, and he loves you, and he's intelligent and spiritual and sensitive and good looking and has a marvelous job, and his mother loves you. I mean, if you're fantasizing, you can go the whole way, right? His mother loves you like a daughter, okay? It's perfect. So you're under the chuppah. Is that a great moment? Yes? Okay, let's fast forward 10 years, and it's a good marriage. The marriage is just as good as you expected. You're eating breakfast. Yeah? He's reading the paper, and you're finishing up, and you're going to clear the table. Is that reasonable? That's reasonable. There's nothing wrong with that. But do you feel the intensity that you felt under the chuppah? No, not because something is wrong, but because you're in a different time frame. You understand this? So right now, 10 minutes before you're both going to go to work, you're both doing what you should be doing. This is appropriate for the time frame. You can't hold on to the intensity of the chuppah. Nobody can. Okay, this is clear? So you could think erroneously that therefore those great moments are gone and forgotten and no longer in existence. They're still in existence, but they're not accessible as long as you're living in time. You understand this? But when you're no longer in the frame of time, time is physical. Okay, the changes all have to do with matter. Rotations and revolution involving matter. When you're not in a physical frame, time has no meaning. So the question is, so how do people experience pleasure in the other world? So finding anything authentic by which you could say, here's how, is difficult because the people who are there, and we're here. But there's a true story. You heard of the Vilna Gaon?
No.
Okay. So the Vilna Gaon was a really, really major scholar who lived a little over 200 years ago. Huge. The word Gaon means genius. Vilna was the capital of Lithuania, so they called him the genius of Lithuania. He knew everything. His wife was a real match for him. He was like a very high level of spiritual, a very, very special person. So she and another woman every Friday would go through Vilna, which is a large city, collecting charity for poor people, so they would have what they need for Shabbos. Now, 200 years ago, there was no refrigeration, so people couldn't like make Shabbos on Thursday and eat it on Shabbos. Everything had to happen on Friday. So they had to collect the money, deliver the money in time for the people to buy and to cook, which put them under pressure because they also had to buy and cook their own Shabbos. Okay, but they did this week after week after week after week. Okay, for years, for decades. So one week, they were walking together, and the other woman, whose name I don't know, pointed across the street and said, oh, look, there's Mr. Levine. I don't know what his name was. He's wealthy. He'll give us a significant amount of money. Let's go ask him. So they went, and they got money from him, and they distributed it. A short time after that, the other woman was taken ill. Now, did any of you ever see a hospital death in America today?
No.
Okay, they clean up the whole thing. The non-Jewish culture is in deep death denial. So if somebody's like about to die in the hospital, they'll put them in a private area because they don't want the other patients to realize that happens. Okay, clear? And you know, the person is clearly like drawing their last breath or something, and the nurse comes in, and how are you doing today, Mr. Greenberg? Yeah, okay. So there's like a lot of death denial. But in those days, 200 years ago in Vilna, that's not how it was. If it was clear that somebody was gravely ill and about to die, they would call the Chevra Kadisha. The Chevra Kadisha literally means the holy society. So the Chevra Kadisha are the people who take care of the needs of the dead and the dying. So for the people who are dying, they would come and know all the appropriate prayers, light candles. They would know what to do. And then after the person died, they would take them through all the rituals, the purification of the body, the burial. So this is considered to be a very great act of kindness, because most of the time we love reciprocal kindness. I'll do for you, and then what? You'll do for me. But anything you do for the dead is pure, because they're not going to do anything for you. Okay, so they call the Chevra Kadisha. And she requested that her friends be called for her to say goodbye to them. So the Vilna Gaon's wife came to her friend's bedside. And she said to her, okay, I want you to make me a promise. This is the Vilna Gaon's wife to her friend. So she says, what? So she said, come back to me in a dream and tell me what it's like on the other side. So she said, I will. So when she died, okay, which was shortly thereafter, she came back in a dream, and the Vilna Gaon's wife said, what is it like there? And she said, they let me come back to you in a dream because I had an honest relationship with you, and I shouldn't have to die on my death, I shouldn't have to lie on my deathbed. But I'm not allowed to tell you very much. So he said, could you tell me anything? So she said, you know me very well. You know what my best moments were. The marriage of my children, having my children, my own marriage, times when I succeeded in things that I was doing. You know my victories and my happy moments. That one time when I pointed with my hand like that and said, oh, there's Mr. Levine, the spiritual joy I have just for that hand gesture makes all of the joy I had in your world feel like nothing. Because it was so much more intense. In this world, everything passes so quickly that the intensity is lost also. So there, where there's no time, even a small reward is bigger than something huge in this world. Okay, so this is what happens when we see our lives. And because we're not in our bodies, which change continually, after death is a permanent state. It's an unchanging state. Now here's where this story gets a little bit more complex. We also did things in this life that were not good. Is that not so? Okay, we all did not good things. So that also doesn't disappear just because you die. You don't become an angel. So remember the girl who died as she was about to buy the bag? Yeah. Okay, that's who she is. She is who she is. So the humiliation that a person feels because of their bad deeds is also real. In this world, you don't have to confront yourself. So even when you do really wrong things, you could conveniently forget it. You're familiar with that? And you don't have to go back there unless you want to, which is usually not such a great idea. So the word for this humiliation in Hebrew is Gehenna, which is usually translated as hell. But in fact, Gehenna is the name of an actual place. So I want you to go in your mind's eye, go to the Jaffa Gate. You've all been there, you know where it is? Cross the street, and you have this big place where it's called the Art Colony. You've seen this? They sell arts and crafts. Keep walking. Soon you come to the Cinematheque. You've seen big fences. They sometimes do productions there. You know what I'm talking about? It's in the valley. Here's the Jaffa Gate. You're walking towards the Kotel on the road, not in the gate, but on the road, outside. So soon you're going to pass a fenced-off area. It'll say Sultan's Pools a little bit beyond that. It's a valley. So today they have the Cinematheque there. In earlier times, that whole valley was called the Valley of Gehenna. Why? Because the idol worshippers of the time had a ritual. These were not Jews, these were non-Jewish idol worshippers. They had a huge idol, like a life-size, a bigger-than-life idol. It was made out of metal. And they would light a fire inside it and put in burning coals. So an act of devotion that they would do would be to run people through the idol. Okay, so it was considered like, the idol had like 7 different encasements. So if you can get to the external one, that's an act of devotion. Going further in is even better. But nobody could survive the inner one. They would run their children through this. They would be forced to run their children through this by the idolatrous priests, and they would do it. And the screams of the children being burned to death by their own parents gave that whole valley the name Gehenna or hell. You could understand that. So people use that same name to describe the kind of humiliation people feel when they face up to who they are. So it's described in two different ways allegorically. There's nothing physical about this. It's all allegorical. So there's Gehenna of fire, allegorically, and of ice. So fire has to do with all of the misguided passions. So if you think for a moment about times you were screaming at people and saying what you shouldn't say and you can't take back, that's fire. And people do worse than that. There are people who murdered. There are people who did grievous physical damage to people. And you forget it. You know, you put it aside, but it doesn't, it's still real. There's also Gehenna of ice, coldness, hatred, cutting off, even from people to whom you owe great debts of gratitude. Which do you think is worse, the ice or the fire? This is a subjective question. There's no right answer. What do you think?
Fire.
You think fire is worse? I think ice is worse. Okay, so you have to face up to that.
Why is ice worse?
This is just an opinion. It's not subjective. To me, the feeling of hatred is worse than the act of hatred. It's a subjective.
Oh, the feeling of hatred. Okay.
Yeah, it's subjective. I'm not saying that it's true. Okay, in any case, there's a difference, though, between the reward and punishment in one very important thing. Now, understanding what I'm saying next requires you to think a little bit deeper. Okay, who's the real you? Who's the real you? In the morning prayers, one of the lines is, "The soul you gave me, O Lord, is pure." You ever saw that in the Siddur? So who's me? If you're saying the soul you gave me, who's me? You understand the question? So the me is the choosing self. It's both body and soul, good and bad. But the enduring part of you, the most basic part of you, is the pure soul. So here's Rambam's allegory. I want you to imagine a candle burning in a very dark room. So if the room is completely dark, could you see something of the candle's light even in the corners? Could you or not? Yes. Suppose you put a curtain around the candle. Could you still see its light in the far corners? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on how thin the curtain is. But suppose you put 500 curtains, then for sure not. What if it's 1,000? Okay. So the soul is compared to a candle. It says, Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. Hashem's candle is the human soul. The soul is always pure. But you could lose awareness of it. We make curtains that make the choosing self unaware of the spiritual reality within us. So choice after choice after choice could create limitless curtains. So there are people who are so toughened through their bad choices that you can't even imagine them making a good choice. So I'll give you an example of the kind of person I'm talking about, like one extreme. You know anything about Saddam Hussein?
Yes.
Who was Saddam Hussein?
Terrorist.
What?
He was the leader.
He was the leader of Iraq. So what was his rulership like?
It was a dictatorship.
It was a dictatorship. It was a brutal dictatorship. He was an egomaniac. He was paranoid. So at one point in a rage, he was angry at his son-in-law, who he thought had betrayed him. He killed his grandchildren.
What?
Okay. So in order for him to be able to do that, he would have to erect innumerable curtains that cut him off from any sense of compassion and decency. Could you see where this is so? But we all have some curtains. We all have some curtains. So how do you tear down the curtains? So in this world, we have tshuva. In the other world, just the disassociation that comes from regret tears down the curtains. So I want to talk to you about disassociation. Let's say in this world is much easier to grasp. Think of something bad that a person could do. Give me an example of something bad a person could do. It doesn't have to be something you did. What? What?
Steal food.
Steal food from your roommate here in the campus, let's say. So you go to Angel's, and which is conveniently open 24 hours because you can never tell when an eclair becomes a necessity. And you buy a whole bag full of cookies and eclairs, and you put it stupidly where? Where's the dumbest place to put it? On top of the fridge. And you, because you're in a rather piggy mood, because why else would you have gone to Angel's in the middle of the night? You made yourself a cup of coffee and you ate 4 small eclairs. Okay? You think the rest is for tomorrow. But comes tomorrow, what's on top of the fridge? An empty bag. And you ask your roommates, did you see the bag? And what do they all say? No. What are you talking about? Maza eclair. Right. Yes, okay. Okay, so let's say you were the one who stole the eclairs from somebody else. Now this could happen. Could happen. So in this world, how do you deal with it? So I'm going to give you a formula that tears down the curtain. So here are the curtains you erected. One curtain. I'm important, she's not important. That's a serious curtain. That's pretty thick. Next, I have to get what I want as soon as I want it. That's a pretty thick curtain. Okay, next. Lying is okay if it's to keep me out of trouble. That's a thick curtain. Okay, you can see you put up some pretty thick curtains there. Okay, so how do you tear them down? First step. Admit to God at least that you did something wrong. So in your own words, in your own time, you say to God, you know what, I shouldn't have taken those eclairs. That's like stealing. Okay, next. You have to go to the person and say, remember, you asked like about the, the bag. Remember the bag on top of the fridge? The truth is, I did actually see it. And so what's her line next? You just admitted to seeing it, yeah?
Did you take some?
Did you take some of the eclairs? And you say, I actually, did. And I'm really sorry. It was the wrong thing to do. And I know, I know they cost like 12 shekels, and here I took all of the rest of them. So here's 24 shekels, and I'm really sorry. I'm not going to do this again. What's going to happen next?
She's going to tell the whole bunk. No, it's good.
For sure, she'll tell everyone. Don't trust people too much. Yeah, she'll tell everyone, and then
She's going to appreciate that you told her.
on some level, she's going to trust you more. So what you just did now were 2 things. You acted fairly, but you also took away not only your curtain that you put up, but you also helped her tear down one of hers. Got it? So now your curtains, I'm more important. No, you're not more important. Lying is okay. No, you told the truth. You took down the curtains. So what I want, this is called tshuva, which means returning things to how they were. So the 3 steps are admitting what's wrong, but that's between you and God, not between you and people. Okay, regretting what you did, and if you involved another person, demonstrating that regret by restoring whatever needs to be restored, and resolving not to do it again. That's how you tear down the curtains. So there's no curtain that's impenetrable, which is very good news. So in this world, it's easy to tear down the curtains. In the other world, you have to let the disassociation that comes from saying, I can't believe I did this, tear it down for you, which is much harder. Okay, clear? So the bottom line is, what our topic was what happens when you make good choices, what happens when you make bad choices. So now I'm going to tell you something very interesting. You gave the girl back the money for her eclairs, yeah? So here you are, a minute before you stole them. Okay, that is the right word, not ate, stole. Okay, so I just want to point this out. Okay, a minute before you stole the eclairs. Let's say you resisted the temptation, or you thought your roommate, you thought you heard her coming, so you didn't eat them. Were you on a higher level the minute you gave back the money, or before you ate the eclairs to begin with? When you gave back the money, you're on a higher level. Okay, got this? Okay, because you dealt with stuff. So these curtains of selfishness, dishonesty, they were probably there before. This isn't the only time you ever told a lie. This isn't the only time you put yourself first. Isn't that true? So you will end up in a better place if you do tshuva than if you never would have done this wrong deed to begin with. So the deed that generated your tshuva is considered by God to be like a mitzvah because it took you to a higher place. Okay, that's what I'm leaving you with now. Okay, take that thought with you to get to Yom Kippur.